Well, hey everybody, it's Sandy and welcome back to my channel dedicated to helping you advocate for your own health, one topic at a time. So guys, today I want to talk about the impact of boosters and have they worked? So first of all, I'll just say my usual thank you and welcome. Thank you to those of you who are here newly subscribed, and thank you, of course, to those of you who have been with me for a while. If you do find my content helpful and you haven't subscribed, I really hope you'll consider subscribing, and please share with anybody who might find my content helpful. Now, I'll also just give the Sandy's DIY Health Advocacy Facebook group a plug. So we have a Facebook page. You can head on over there and ask to join the Facebook group, and it's an opportunity to interact with other people. It's a really nice group, and people put all kinds of ideas. Sometimes we post articles, and I always post the videos up the day they go online. I post them in the Facebook group as well, because sometimes there's some discussion around there. So it's just a little bit of a more interactive experience. So please head on over there if you're interested and ask to join the group. And speaking of the group, there has been some heated discussion in the group about whether the boosters have worked. This video is really kind of more to put it to bed. If it opens up some discussion, that's fine. I'm not going to shy away from it, but this is really more to put that issue to bed because I see some assertions being made in that group that are a little bit misleading, and maybe there's a misunderstanding. Some of it is just some math that I'm going to show. There are two issues that I want to address about measuring whether the boosters have helped. Issue number one, and something that really concerns me, is when I see somebody assert that the boosters have not worked because they don't protect against people getting infected. They only protect for 8 weeks or something like that. Certainly, if you are only looking at the likelihood of getting infected, one could argue that the boosters are not very effective, because with Omicron here being the predominant variant, in some places the only variant circulating around, it does seem that after several weeks past the boost, you are still almost as likely to get infected as people who are unvaccinated. That is true. And if we were only looking at the likelihood of getting infected, we would say that the boost does not help. That really completely ignores what the cases look like in people who are vaccinated, in people who are vaccinated plus boosted, and in people who are unvaccinated. And the cases tend to look very different in those three groups. I'll just look at the two extreme ends so that we have the comparison. And what you will see is a complete decoupling of the severe disease or hospitalization curve and the infection curve in the group that's vaccinated and boosted. And in the group that's unvaccinated, you see those two curves are more mirroring each other. Maybe not as much as they did with Delta, but they are more mirroring each other than in the vaccinated group, and much more so than in the vaccinated plus boosted group. So what that tells us is that if you are boosted and you get a breakthrough infection, that you are very unlikely to have severe disease. You're very unlikely to end up in the hospital. This is even more true for younger cohorts. And if you do end up in the hospital, the hospitalizations are very short and they almost never go to the ICU. That's a pretty big difference in my opinion. So when people spout out something like that the boost isn't helping at all, I think it's really purposefully ignoring some of these key data points. The likelihood of ending up in an intensive care unit, having that data point approach zero, arguably that one data point alone speaks for the boost. You might say most people aren't going to end up in the ICU anyway with COVID, but having less severe disease, having fewer symptoms, having less inflammation, and I've already talked about in another video, having at the very most only half the chance of long COVID and probably even less chance, bodes very well for the boost. When I see something in the Sandy's DIY Health Advocacy Facebook group going forward, if I see a comment like that the boost isn't helping at all based on infection rates, I'm just going to refer to this video, so I don't have to go to the trouble of typing out my answer anymore. It actually brings me to a little bit of a sidebar. I've had people ask me why I don't remove certain members from the group because of misinformation or whatever. I'm just going to address that once more here, which is that I don't consider myself the arbiter of truth. And I think that truth is easy to find when there are data points. You know, we have data that we can look at and we can talk about it, and the right answer will emerge for people who are looking for it. And I would rather that people feel comfortable being there in the group, because maybe there's somebody who's mistaken. Maybe there's somebody who's saying whatever they're saying because this is something they've heard. And then when they see the answers of other people, they can be enlightened by it. That assumes that the former is mistaken and the latter is correct. But same thing the other way around. If somebody brings something to the Facebook group that's, worth thinking about and chewing on it, it only makes me and anybody else who's participating better off to be delving into information and finding facts. I just think that the only thing worse than what we're calling misinformation is censorship, because then there's no way to fact check and there's no way to know what to check against. So as long as people aren't nasty or rude or anything like that, everybody's welcome in the Sandy's DIY Health Advocacy Facebook group. And, if something's just gotten annoying to you, which I totally get, just ignore it. Try not to engage in it. Now, the second metric that I want to talk about that I often see stated, and I think it just represents a misunderstanding of how data is calculated and presented, is number of people in the hospital who are vaccinated versus number of the people in the hospital who are unvaccinated. And I saw this in the Facebook group just recently, and I saw it actually way back when Delta was raging in Israel, after Israel had everybody vaxxed and before they had their third shot. At one point I saw something reported that said more of the people in the hospital are vaccinated than unvaccinated. And that's what I saw in the Facebook group recently about Omicron. More of the people in the hospital now are vaccinated. I guess this is in certain areas because different areas have different vaccination rates, and that would change that a little bit. But the point is, you're not doing the math correctly if you just look at the raw numbers of people in the hospital and thinking that reflects the risk of ending up in the hospital based on your vaccination status. Not at all. I'm going to go over that in just a moment. I'm going to try to put some things over here to help me give a visual. But I've come up with two very simple sort of examples to help people see this concept. The first one is seatbelts, and somebody put this in the Facebook group's discussion, so I have that person to thank for this, not myself. If you look at the number of people who succumb to motor vehicle injuries at any given time, you'll find that the majority of them were wearing seatbelts. So does that mean the seatbelt has a negative efficacy after a while? Which, by the way, let's not even use that term, negative efficacy. Does the seatbelt cause the fatalities in motor vehicle accidents? No. The reason that you see the vast majority of people who die in motor vehicle accidents or just get into motor vehicle accidents are wearing seatbelts is because the vast majority of everybody is wearing seatbelts. It's already so widely overrepresented. And that was the case with the Israeli data that came out, back, like I said, about 6 months ago when Delta was present. And they said, well, the majority of people in the hospital were vaccinated. Well, that was after they had their rigorous vaccination campaign, and the majority of everybody was vaccinated. I'm just going to show an example with very simple numbers of how this might be very misleading. Let's say we have a population of people, just 100 people, and that's going to break down easily in percentages, right? So we have 100 people, and this population is 90% vaccinated. So that means we have 90 people that are vaccinated, and we have 10 people that are unvaccinated. And let's say that we are going to look at any point in time, we're going to try to determine the likelihood of ending up in the hospital based on vaccination status. So does the vaccination status make you more or less likely to end up in the hospital? And let's say at that one snapshot in time, we look, and lo and behold, we have 6 people in the hospital total out of this 100. That would be a pretty high hospitalization rate, by the way, 6% of a population. But let's say that's the number. And 4 of them are people who were fully vaccinated, and only 2 are people who are unvaccinated. And based on this is the kind of assertion I've seen in some of the discussion that's going on in the Facebook group. More of the hospitalized people are actually vaccinated than unvaccinated. So in my example, 4 people are vaccinated and they're in the hospital, and only 2 of the people who are hospitalized are unvaccinated. So that would suggest, 4 is double 2, right? We have twice as many vaccinated people who are hospitalized as unvaccinated people. Maybe it's safer to be unvaccinated. No, you're missing a denominator. So in order to calculate the likelihood of ending up in the hospital if you are vaccinated, it has nothing to do with the unvaccinated people. So the way to calculate it is to take the number of vaccinated people who are in the hospital and divide that by the number of people who are vaccinated in the entire population that you're surveying. It has nothing to do with the unvaccinated portion. So in my example, the number of people in the hospital who are vaccinated, we said, is 4. And the total number of vaccinated people in that population is 90. So the likelihood of ending up in the hospital if you are vaccinated is 4 out of 90, which is about 1 out of 23. 1 out of 23 chance. It's about a 5% chance. So if you are fully vaccinated in this particular example, you've got about a 5% chance of ending up in the hospital. So now let's do the math for the unvaccinated group, where we only have 2 people in the hospital. It would be the number of unvaccinated people in the hospital, which is 2, over the total number of unvaccinated people in this population, which is 10. So 2 out of 10 is 1 out of 5, or a 20% chance. So you can see that when you do the math correctly, even though the number of people in the hospital who are vaccinated is much larger than the number of people in the hospital unvaccinated, in fact, that's just because so many more people in this population were vaccinated. The people who are vaccinated have a 5% chance of ending up in the hospital, whereas the people who are unvaccinated, it's about 20%. I'm all happy to entertain any discussion at all in the Facebook group page. I think it can only help all of us get to the bottom of things, but this is just an incorrect conclusion when looking at raw numbers of people in hospitals, okay? The fact that you see in some particular community a larger number of people in the hospital are vaccinated, well, that's because there's just many, many more vaccinated people in that population at large. It doesn't mean their risk was raised by the vaccine. And I will say that when we look at the booster data, it does appear that the boost is phenomenally helpful for much older people. It's very helpful for middle-aged people. And when you get down to the younger cohorts, it seems that there's less of an argument for it. But again, that's only if you're looking at just one thing, which is severe illness, hospitalization. I would like to see more data on just how sick people get, because there's a lot of young people can tolerate being quite ill before they will have to be in the hospital. So that doesn't mean there's not going to be a tremendous difference between boosted and unboosted. I'm personally recommended to both my kids who are adults. I have a 28-year-old and a 25-year-old. They're both out on their own, but I recommended both of them get boosted. They both did get boosted. One of them got COVID, and it was like 2 days of a sore throat. And I would take a lot of convincing for me to believe that that didn't have to do in large part because of the boost. Now, do I think that she would have been fine if she hadn't been boosted and just double vaccinated? I do, but I wouldn't have wanted her to struggle any more than she needed to. I preferred that she had her immune system primed and ready to go and ready to face this challenge. And I'm very grateful to Pfizer in her case that she did. So anyway, I just really wanted to clear this up. I feel like I've been having trouble stating this whole equation and how to do it simply like in text on a Facebook groups page discussion. So I don't know if I've made it any simpler or if I've made it more complicated. Let me know. Let me know if it was helpful. And let me know if you guys have any questions. Just put them down below in the comments section. And until next time, be well. Bye-bye.